Who is the Emperor of the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft? This sounds like a ridiculous question, right? How does somebody rule a Minecraft server that has no rules? Well, when you have hundreds of thousands of players over the decades, there's bound to be one or a few which come to desire power, influence, clout and attention here on 2b2t. Today's video focuses on the group that allows 2b2t emperors to exist. This group is considered the Rome of 2b2t, the closest thing to government and order on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft. But how can any government exist on a server that has no rules and is pure chaos? We will answer that soon, but for now, we're going to focus on two of these emperors. The first of these emperors founded one of the most powerful groups on 2b2t, and started a 7-year dynasty of Imperial emperors on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft. The second emperor bring the same group that the first emperor founded from the brink of collapse to the most powerful it had ever been. There's a lot of history to cover today, so let's get started. The first person to ever declare himself Emperor of 2b2t was a player by the name of Legatus. Many people who actively play 2b2t, and even across other 2b2t-like servers, will recognise this name instantly. Legatus was a player who joined in 2012 from 4chan. He was known to base with small amounts of people, but he was also known to never grief a base, so he was very trusted on 2b2t. Legatus formed many important relationships with many powerful 2b2t players. After several years of playing 2b2t, he created a base known as Layton. Legatus slowly invited many of his friends to Layton. Some say it became the capital of 2b2t. Layton began to have laws and regulations put in place, such as no stealing from each other while in the city, no killing each other while in the city, no griefing each other's build in the city. It was very regulated. Because of this, Layton became a hub of trade and commerce across 2b2t. Many players flocked to Layton to build large monuments and bases and create all types of sorts of structures there, because they knew it was safe. They knew their base wouldn't get griefed, but they could still hang out with other players. Layton became known as one of the most secure and largest bases on 2b2t. The base had a museum filled with historic items and history books of past events. The base had roads to each person's buildings and plots of land. It even had large walls surrounding the entirety of the base to protect it from mobs. The base was lit up entirely with torches and other light sources to make sure that no mobs were in the base. Eventually, the citizens of Layton declared Legatus the Emperor of Layton. However, not long after this, the city started to have problems. Its members began to fight each other over small squabbles and disputes. Legatus also started to invite new players from spawn, people who just joined 2b2t, which was very risky. See, when you invite people you don't know to a base that is quite large and has a lot of resources, these people might have ill intention and want to grief this base. In fact, a large majority of people you invite to your base on 2b2t will most likely grief it. Back in 2014, however, this wasn't the case, because a lot of people in 2014 wouldn't just grief a base. It's more common now, but back in 2014 there was less of this. People in 2014 were generally nicer. It only took one player to grief the base, one person that Legatus shouldn't have invited to the base, and it happened. The player who griefed the base still hasn't been found to this day. He waited until every member of Layton was offline and knew to the entirety of the base. This is most likely because he didn't want the reputation of being the griefer of the base. Many lost their homes that day. Many lost their valuable items that day. Many lost the companionship of the base members that tragic day. So many great monuments and buildings were lost, all because of one silly mistake that Legatus had made. However, Legatus was not going to give up. He was not going to allow for his power and influence he had been building up to go away that quickly. So Legatus decided to create a group known as the Imperials. He wanted to have an orderly group on a chaotic server. He dreamed of a group that allowed for players who were trusted to freely move to each other's bases and travel between bases, trading in-game items between bases and building at each other's bases. Remember how I said Legatus was trusted all throughout 2b2t? Well, he used this to his advantage. He offered each base he was in to join his group, the Imperials. As a member of the Imperials, each of their base mates would receive citizenship. Being a citizen of the Imperials meant that you could travel to any of the Imperial bases on 2b2t. It meant that your base would have visitors from time to time, and it meant that your base would be protected from griefers. As people who griefed an Imperial base, he promised to hunt down and grief them back, and perhaps even kill them in PvP. Most of the bases he offered to join the Imperials accepted this contract. These bases, or tribes, if you will, eventually lost their identity as a base, and instead began to assimilate into the Imperial identity. Legatus even decided to spread the Imperials to several other servers like 2b2t. In 2014, the time this was all happening, there were many servers like 2b2t. These are also known as 2b2t clones. These servers were pure chaos and anarchy like 2b2t. Legatus set up colonies on these servers, which began to grow rapidly. Now you could be a citizen of the Imperials on 2b2t or a server like 2b2t. You could move from 2b2t to another server and still be a part of the same group of people. However, Legatus started to get annoyed. He started to miss the days where everyone trusted him, where no one hated him and where no one gave him much attention. As the Emperor of the 2b2t, he gained a lot of attention from many players waiting to have power as he did. Legatus eventually quit out of nowhere, and he didn't want the attention. No citizen of the Imperials has heard from him since 2015. The remnants of his empire lives onto this day. When he quit, a player named Legio made himself Emperor, and when he quit, another Emperor took over, and so on. 8 of these Emperors came and went in a 6-year period, and we fast forward all the way to early 2020. Last year, a player named by the name of Gamerman was crowned the Emperor of the Imperials, after the previous Emperor was overthrown by the Imperial Senate. They did this by holding a Senate vote, which made Gamerman the Emperor and kicked out the old Emperor. Since the time of Legatus, a lot of the Imperials' structure had changed. They now have a Senate, which is a group of people who control the Imperials. It's kind of like a council, just that it's a legislative body. It's kind of like a council, but not really. We'll get into that later. But before we get any further into Gamerman, we need to talk about his history, the history of Gamerman. Gamerman joined in 2019 as a good PvPer who was recruited into the Imperial army. Gamerman slowly worked his way through the military ranks. He eventually was invited to the Imperial Senate, where he was able to make friends with many senators, and thus eventually take power. Gamerman convinced the senators he was friends with to vote on a proposal to make himself the Emperor, which worked. Now Gamerman inherited an empire that was on the brink of collapse. The previous Emperor didn't keep the empire sustainable, but in fact ruined it quite drastically. Gamerman decided that he was not going to let this group that he loved so much die so easily, due to one bad emperor. The previous emperor started several wars with other groups, who had griefed and destroyed many of the Imperial stashes and overpowered items, monuments and bases. Gamerman was angered by this, so he decided to directly attack any group who was against the Imperials. Gamerman had no mercy on these anti-Imperial groups. Gamerman sent spies into each one of these groups to gather information such as base coordinates and plans. Once enough information was gathered, Gamerman launched a vicious campaign of conquest. Gamerman started off by taking down smallish tribes which were trying to destroy the empire. There are too many tribes to list and too many battles to talk about, but one of the main tribes called themselves Exoshek. It was a collision of many different tribes that have formed together. Gamerman's military general, known as Scooby-Doo Pimp, was able to successfully get coordinates to Exoshek's bases and stashes, the entirety of them. With this, Scooby-Doo Pimp went to their base and offered them a surrender contract. This contract stated that none of their bases would be griefed by the Imperials as long as they surrendered to the Imperials and become a part of the Imperials. Essentially, they were saying that their tribes would assimilate into the Imperials. This meant that Exoshek couldn't attack Imperial outposts anymore, and they'd essentially be enslaved by the Imperials or have all of their block game items griefed. And this is what the Imperials did to many groups. They assimilated groups that hated the Imperials into their culture, and eventually those groups, hopefully, would become friends with the Imperials and help the Imperials grow into further conquest. That was the idea of it, at least. This also meant that Exochet couldn't attack any Imperial outposts or bases anymore, which was one of the many goals that Gamerman had in mind. He didn't want any of these tribes to keep trying to pursue the Imperials and trying to make their time on servers difficult. After several months of conquest, Gamerman was deemed the saviour of the Empire. From an empire that was on the brink of collapse, with many enemies, Gamerman was able to single-handedly destroy the enemies of the Empire. Across many servers the Imperials played on, including 2b2t, Gamerman became known as one of the best emperors to ever exist. To this day, many Imperial citizens regard him as a 2b2t god. Gamerman in his reign of Emperor created many things, such as created nether and overworld highways on all servers that the Imperials were on. He recreated the Imperial army that Legatus created 6 years ago, and Gamerman founded many cities on 2b2t, and many 2b2t-like servers, such as the Imperial City, which is a base you're seeing right now. But like all 2b2t emperors, there is a time to leave. Gamerman, due to real-life issues, was unable to play 2b2t anymore, and thus voluntarily left the Emperor position. This sudden and mysterious leaving made Gamerman a god in the eyes of many Imperials, kind of like Legatus did. Both of these emperors took a group of players who were insignificant and weak, and turned them into a vast group of players who were strong and powerful, and had laws and were orderly, kind of like a government on 2b2t. The Imperials on 2b2t is to be considered the small amount of order and law that 2b2t, to this day, has. Though the Imperials on 2b2t are not the size they once were, they are still on 2b2t to this day, and they are again continuing to expand. Maybe in the future another Emperor will come to 2b2t and expand the Imperials on the oldest anarchy server in Minecraft to new lengths. Who knows? If you enjoyed this video, please forget to smash the like button, genocide the comment section, and really mass murder the subscribe button. And if you have any questions about this video or anything at all, let me know. You can also join my Discord in the description as well, and if you want to see the sources that I got for this video, such as like where I found this information from, it's in the description as well. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.